In business, we can be so preoccupied with chasing down new customers and offering them sparkling deals to attract them that we neglect our loyal customers. Looking after customer relations is vital to building your business. If people are happy with your service, not only will they come back for more, but they can become advocates for your brand, bringing more customers through your door without you having to do any of the hard work. Tune in with Ali Cudby to learn more about properly maintaining your relationship with your customers and further improving it.
I want to welcome you to the Dominate Your Market podcast, where we interview leaders, CEOs, founders, and high-impact business development professionals to get their insights on how you can grow your business efficiently, build an amazing company, and still have a life. Today's guest is Ali Cudby. Ali is the founder and CEO of Alignment Growth Strategies, a customer experience consultancy, as well as a co-founder and CEO of CXology. Is that correct? CXology? Yes. I love it. An online training program for customer retention and growth. Ali also wrote a book on customer experience called Keep Your Customers. I'm going to buy that today, by the way.
Excellent.
Great to have you on the show, Ali.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Did I pronounce your last name correctly?
Cudby, yes.
I am so weird about pronunciations because everybody's misspelled my last name for my whole entire life. So I'm like, oh, I should have asked her ahead of time.
I get it. I get like Cuddy, Cubby, Cuddly.
What?
Like there's no L in there. So whatever.
What? No, it's a B, L. What the heck? Jeez. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm super excited to have you on because this topic, customer retention, I don't think it gets enough attention, number one. I think the majority, and you'll speak about this, the majority of companies, in my humble opinion, at least all the clients I've worked with, I do ask that question, by the way, and I've asked that question for about 15 years now. You know, what do you do to retain the customers? What's the customer experience look like? And there are a lot of them look at me cross-eyed like, what are you talking about? So let's dig into that. But what I want to find out first from you is just give the listeners a little bit about your background, like where you came from, where you got to where you are now. Just I'd like to get to know you a little better.
Sure. So right after college, I started in Hollywood, as you would expect. And
As I would,
right.
Crazy.
Did that for a few years and decided it wasn't for me and ended up back in Philadelphia for business school. And then from Wharton went to the New York Times Company. And that's really where I got my start in this whole world of customer loyalty and retention. I was working in a little division inside the corporate side of the company that acted like an internal consulting group. And long story short, ended up on a project with the call center for the newspaper and realized, wow, there's a lot of opportunity to do this better. And when you support your employees in being more successful in their jobs, you create these opportunities for retention and growth. And so that project is really what launched me onto this path. And then since then, I worked for a variety of different companies mostly in the media sector, and then took a weird left turn, created an online bra fit training and certification program. I know. And created this online training thing that became the #1 global program for training professional lingerie professionals. And but the weird thing was I created this thing. Right. That's not exactly, Hollywood and then bras. You didn't expect to go there. So the thing that was really interesting was I had this program, it's doing really well. And I would hear from my customers, oh gosh, Ali, our customers are crying tears of joy in the fitting room. This has been transformative. And I would say, now that's great. What are you doing? Exactly the question that you asked. What are you doing to make sure that your customers come back? And they never had an answer. They were just like, oh, we're just going to keep giving them good bra fittings like you taught us. And that's not enough. That doesn't win. And so much to my surprise, I looped back around to my corporate days and ended up back in this customer loyalty and retention game. And here we are.
What an awesome story. I mean, just kind of a few twists and turns there. Hollywood, bras. And then, I mean, but I love these kind of origination stories, right? Where it's just like, for the listeners to understand kind of how you got to where you're at now, and also you're an entrepreneur, you had online businesses. Same thing with me. I launched the world's first golf fitness membership site in 2001. So long time ago. I took it to 7 figures. So it was a very, very successful business. But so we're kindred souls as far as that goes. But I definitely want to dive into this because, gosh, I mean, so first off, given your story, what is your inspiration to kind of continue this and really grow on this? I know you wrote a book. And I can't wait to get the book, by the way, and I will refer it to my clients as well, for sure, no doubt. So, but what inspires you to kind of just dive in and get better at your craft? Talk about that a little bit.
To me, we all have an opportunity. And one of the things that we're sort of missing in our lives a lot of the time is feeling seen, heard, and valued. And that doesn't sound like business, right? It sounds like something that you're getting out of a self-help book and all those things. But the reality is that as customers, and there's lots of really good science to back this up, as customers, we respond based on how we feel we're being treated. There's a McKinsey study that shows that customers, 70% of the buying decision is based on how customers feel they're being treated in the transaction. So we like to quantify things. We like to be data-driven. That's all great. But the bottom line is this is a human transaction. No matter, most of my work now is in B2B and a lot of it in B2B SaaS. And so it's a very numbers-driven game. But the bottom line is how people feel drives their decision-making processes. And to me, that's fascinating. Taking this kind of mushy piece of feelings and tying it into rigorous business process that drives results. I don't know, that sort of yin and yang just rocks my world.
I love the idea, what you just said too. I've been big on kind of psychology I should have gotten my major in psychology, but I got an exercise physiology because I was an athlete and did all this stuff. But I love the mind, right? And that yellow book you see right over there talks a lot about mindset. And I just actually did a post this morning on LinkedIn, one of my childhood stories. I don't know if you saw it or not, but anyways, buying a car cash at the age of 16. I worked on a farm to get the money and all that. It's a cool story. You have to go check it out. And again, it's that mindset, right? Where and so for consumers, understanding what their emotions are, what triggers them to make a decision, and I talk to my clients all the time about this. Have you talked to any of your happy customers and found out why they're happy? Have you found out why they're not happy? Ask these simple questions to 5 or 10 of them, and you got gold on your hands there.
Well, and we know that that's true in sales. You talk to a salesperson about how do you get the sale, and they will tell you that you have to think about it from the perspective of like, what's their pain and how are you resolving their pain? And how can you remind them that they have this painful reality that they really need to fix? So we know that it's true when it comes to sales. And then somehow we magically think that as soon as the contract is signed, then people go back to being bots, and that this sort of connection and relationship building piece is no longer needed in any systematic way. And that's why I titled my book, Keep Your Customers, because getting them good, need to do that. Sales has a really important job, but the money, the revenue comes from the longevity. It doesn't. Gosh. And in fact, this is not news, but if you win a customer and then you don't keep them, you're probably serving them at a loss. So you're paying for the pleasure of having won that customer and churned them out before they became profitable. So retention is the whole game.
Well, and what you talk about there too, as far as we call it in marketing, lifetime value of a customer. Lifetime value, right? And I think a lot of CEOs and business owners, especially of the bigger, I work in kind of the $5 to $20 million range is who I consult with, typically smaller. And a lot of times they don't know the lifetime value. And then so I educate them on it and we figure it out and they're like, whoa, holy. And some of them are, manufacturing clients and things like that and construction clients where the dollar amounts can get 6 and 7 figures.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you're talking those dollar amounts, what you do is huge. My God, it's like literally figure this out, make the experience as good as you can make it. Another thing I've said too, and I want you to talk about this, referrals. So whenever I talk to a client, I say, so are you proud of how you treat your customers? Oh, for sure, absolutely. How often do they refer somebody to your business? Well, number one, they don't know the answer. I don't know. Well, and I say, well, for every new client you get, and this could be, it's different in different sectors, right? But I always tell everybody, for every client you get, you should get at least another one. And when you do, that doubles your revenue right there. Right there.
Absolutely.
Crazy.
And so I look at that as sort of direct versus indirect revenue. So, if a client refers you to a new client, then that referring client has indirectly provided additional revenue to you. They've improved their value to you. And yet, almost across the board, companies don't track that. Or, this boggles my mind. They don't say thank you. Right?
Oh, yeah.
So I am literally today, I got a referral recently, we closed the deal. And so I am literally today shopping for a referral gift for the person who made the referral. Why wouldn't you do that? Like, to me, that's a no-brainer, but so many companies don't do it.
It's interesting. And I don't want to make it a money thing, but one gentleman in a sector I was in a while back, I gave a really healthy referral dollar amount, right? Or what I would consider healthy. At the end of that year, he sent me a message and he said, Michael, I took my family to Hawaii on the referral income you gave me. The family to Hawaii, right? So we're not talking hundreds of dollars here. But what you do is you look at the value, right, of that referral. And if that referral is, and again, not that that's all about a money thing here, but, and I don't know, I'm sure you'll get a super cool gift, because I think you can either do money possibly or a creative gift. And I would think probably the ladies, I don't want to sound like a sexist, but I have no clue. I have no creativity. I wouldn't know what to get as far as a gift. So I'm sure you're going to get something super cool that would be valuable to them.
Yeah. And
that
comes hand in hand with taking these relationships up a notch. Like, look, people like cash, right? But it's not as memorable. And it's also not people will post a picture of the gift that I send and put it on their socials.
Wow.
And because it's unusual and,
That's
and
awesome.
so, I mean, it doesn't always happen, but some, it often will happen. And so it's just one more way of building connections, building relationships, and amping up the humanity of the work that we do in a way that is really good business. So, it always has to be, we talk about, and I talk about this in the book, there has to be this heart side of it, the heart of the work that you do with your customers, the heart of how you engage, but it has to be backed by the smart of it. So, when you get to a bigger company, you need a more robust process for managing these things. So it's not just like, oh yeah, go buy them a gift. You need to have structure around that. You need to have process around that. And you need to be able to track and measure how your team is managing those processes and, verifying that whatever it is that you want them to do actually happens, and making sure that you're capturing the data so that you can analyze it later, all of those things. So this isn't, this has to be something that you codify and like I said, track and measure so that there's actual robust business process behind it.
So why do you think companies skip over this? Right? Like, I mean, it's an obvious thing, right? It's that duh thing, right? Like, duh. But why do you think a lot of companies skip over this?
Oh, it's a great question.
I can see the pain in your voice. Oh.
So I think that it's a couple things. One is a lot of companies are sales driven. They pride themselves. They talk about it. We're a sales driven culture. And I think that that's an old school way of thinking, but it persists because a lot of CEOs came up as salespeople. And so it's what they're familiar with. And also, sales is a simpler way of examining anything, or, the revenue driver, right?
Sure.
So it's, generally a person or a small group of people, and it's binary. We got the business, we didn't get the business. And once somebody comes in the door, there are more complicating factors of what is happening and not happening, and what's being successful and not successful in that customer's experience with the company. And so it's just not as straightforward, but it still is a no-brainer. It still is a no-brainer to create process around retention and growth. So that's the reason that I think it happens this way, but I still am every day just mind boggled by the fact that companies don't have these processes in place and don't do them on a consistent basis.
Now, this is an obvious question for you as an expert, but do you ever, like, when you talk to a client and you start with them, do you ever, not abrasively, I have a tendency to get I'm a very aggressive guy. The book is very aggressive, but do you ever ask your clients at the very beginning, like, why did they ignore this? Why did they not do it? I mean, obviously you've got to be careful because they hired you, but I mean, I would be so intrigued with just, hey, I'm so glad you hired me. I'm so curious. Like, I don't know how to soften it. There's not a soft bone in my body, but you know what I mean? Like, have you ever asked people and just, because I know you said, well, this is what I think it is, but I'd be curious to know, like, point blank, a CEO goes, it's this or reasons why they skipped over it.
The thing that I'll hear when I talk to companies and I talk to CEOs especially is there just wasn't anybody in charge of it. And so when you, and so it's starting to change, this whole world of customer success and having a chief customer officer and all of those things is starting to change. But historically, and even today, a lot of companies look at their customer success or customer service or customer support departments as cost centers 100%. And not revenue drivers. And so they don't invest at all. Why, and so that's the piece that keeps companies from focusing on this stuff. And that's what I'll hear from CEOs is it wasn't anybody's job to do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and really, it sounds like a lack of knowledge. I mean, it's sort of common sense that, hey, if we treat our customers really, really good, like, they're going to tell everybody else and they're going to stay longer and they're going to buy more stuff. I mean, it's pretty common sense, but so I think, I'm assuming for you even, I went to your website really quickly right before we started. So it was like a quick little look, but I'm assuming part of what you do is educating and putting out content that, like, listen, here maybe some data and some numbers on it, like lifetime value of customers and all that stuff, because God, it's when you and I talk, it's just such a no-brainer, like, hello, come on. But it's just amazing how so many companies, it's just an afterthought.
Yeah. We have this really amazing tool that is actually free. And
wow.
You can go in and put in just a couple of numbers and it will show you what the value, like what your opportunity is by improving churn.
Wow.
And so, it's like, okay, if you stay on this same path with the churn that you have today, your company will grow to X. If you solve the churn problem, your company could grow to Y. And it'll be the difference between, millions and billions.
Oh yeah. That is incredible. Is that on your website?
So if you go to churnvirus.com, that gets you straight there.
Holy shit.
It is a virus.
Churnvirus.com?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. I love edgy names. That's right out there. That's right out there. Churn and virus, like, holy shit. Okay, listeners, definitely go to that website. I'll actually go check it out because I'll refer clients that I talk to that. That's cool. That's super. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome.
Absolutely. It's a pretty phenomenal tool that we just give away.
That's awesome. So here's the $6 million question for you. So what can companies do to improve customer retention, right? And to hit revenue targets? I mean, to the point of, like, yes, sales, they've got their targets, and a lot of the focus, like you said earlier, is sales. We're sales driven. But let's talk about your sector and just what can they do? How do they hit their targets?
So the answer is actually pretty simple. And it comes down to having clear and consistent processes that employees can follow and know that they're on a path to success in engaging with customers. And so the paths are going to vary based on the company and the kind of customer that they have, and whether that customer is high touch, low touch, tech touch, whatever. But in any of those examples, if you give your employees a path to follow, like, this is what you should do, this is the data we're collecting, here's how we're analyzing the data, it's pretty amazing how employees like it, because now they say, oh yeah, this is what I need to do. But also it's great for the customers because they are being shown, okay, this is the path we're going to take, and here's how you're going to succeed with our products and services. Managing expectations of the customer is the number one way that these relationships go awry. And if you leave a question mark for a customer to fill in, and they don't fill it in the way you want them to, it causes problems. So we try and help clients eliminate those question mark moments with, these very, very step-by-step, processes across the customer experience. So across the customer journey. And we look at what are the key moments in the customer journey and how do we want you to tackle them, so that at every point, the employee knows what to do, and then they're delivering the message with this incredible confidence, because it's like, oh yeah, this is what I'm supposed to do. I know how to do this. I've done it before with other customers. So you're not reinventing the wheel all the time.
Yep.
It's not about the complexity of these processes. It's about the consistency of them.
Well, and I think you said a key thing. A lot of times when I start with a client, they don't have anything documented, right? Like I say, hey, what's your process? Well, it's blah, 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 blah. I said, okay, that's an issue. But on top of that being an issue, is it documented? What do you mean? Well, can I look at it? Can I physically look at this? Can anybody in the company look at this? Oh, yeah, no, we don't have that. Is that important? I'm like, right. So it sounds like that's what you do, right? You document everything, and then everybody on that team knows exactly what they're supposed to do at every touch point, right?
Yes.
That's incredible. I mean, that's massive, right? Like, I really do think that could be a massive revenue generator right there. On top of, because sales, the hardest thing we all know in business, probably the hardest thing to do is to get the sale, right? That's the hardest thing to do, because whether it's cold outreach, whatever it is. But now that you've gotten a sale, you are sitting on gold, right? And I don't want to talk about human beings as gold or money, but you know what I mean? Like the revenue opportunity for that business is really, really big, right?
Yeah. Well, it's like, look, you're an athlete, right? So you think, oh God, I got to get in shape. That's so hard. If I can just get in shape, then I've gotten there. But the reality is, once you get in shape, you got to maintain your routine at the gym, or else it's not going to, you're not going to keep the results. And it's kind of the same thing. Like, yeah, you got to do the work up front, and you think that's the hard work, but actually the value comes in the long tail.
Yeah. It's so funny, because I'm in the middle of a process with 2 clients right now. And one of them, he says, I'm tired of this process stuff, right? And it's a smaller company, but I'm like, okay, but we're not done yet. We need to get this done and documented. Once we do, it's done. And it's a living organism, right? So it does evolve and change and all of that. But I mean, once we get that grind through this process stage, then you're off and running, right? With that particular, and then we're on to another process or whatever, right? But he was very frustrated, not in the point of like, I mean, he saw the progress, he saw where it was headed, but his personality didn't click with doing that, right? Obviously, because they didn't have it. And he's like, oh man, when's this thing going to be done? I'm like, well, the faster you get things to me, the faster we'll get this thing done. So let's go.
Right. And that's another reason why sales wins a lot of the time, right? Like, sales is sexy. You get to bang a gong and throw confetti and do all that stuff. And, nobody says awesome. Like, oh, I got my kickoff meeting process finalized. No one's banging a gong for that.
That is so funny. Well, it's true. It's sort of like that. got what the untold hero, or the underground person who's just like doing a great job, bringing in more money, but the celebration's more on that front end, which is not, that's altogether not right, by the way. That company culture, that should be equal, right? You should be celebrating everybody equally. I know, don't get, culture, that's a whole, I've got 3 or 4 podcasts coming up on culture right now, because boy, that's a big, especially with what's going on in quiet quitting, the Great Resignation, and all the stuff that's happening out there. But so here's another question for you. So how should companies justify investing in customer retention, in the sense of like even bringing somebody like you on, or how should they justify this? Or how do you, if you're talking to a prospect, let's say, and how do you get them to really embrace this?
So, it's honestly looking at the numbers. Here's where you are. And so we pull out the churn virus calculator all the time.
Yeah.
And say, okay, let's run your numbers. And when they see the financial impact of churn and what it does to their company and what the potential is if they cure it, then it's like, oh, it is in a couple of minutes, because it's an actual real-time graphical calculator. Damn. And you see that bar chart move, and it's like, oh, so that's a pretty
you see it happening.
Yeah, in real time.
Oh, that is freaking, I'm assuming that right there is probably close some deals for you.
Yeah, it does.
Like on the spot.
Yes, because they don't, and then we start to talk about, and then there's the benefit of referral, and then there's all of these other things. And so, the impact of the negative plus the upside of the positive, that's what people need to understand, is that closing the deal, isn't the win.
Mm-mm. So what would you say, like a first step? So let's say a CEO is listening to the podcast and they're like, yeah, we're not doing this, right? So what would be, outside of contacting you, which we'll put all your contact information, but outside of contacting you, what's something they could do? What would you say like the first step would be for them to, they listen to the podcast, and I always believe in action, and that book I talk about taking action all the time, in all caps, by the way. So what would be the first thing they could do? They listen to this podcast, and I want all the listeners, go do something right now. Frickin' turn this thing off and go do something, even something little, take some action. What could they do that could at least start that momentum going?
So, go play with the calculator, right? So that's easy. But also look at your own numbers and understand, like, what has the cost of churn been for you? Or, what, we're editing this, right?
No, just keep going. It's raw. Go. This is, I could have my dog barking right now, but he's not. So we're good.
All right. So, A, look at the calculator. B, take a look at the reality inside your business, and C, like, figure out what processes you do and don't have. Like, be real about where you are. And are you treating the customer's experience after the sale like this is somebody that you value and want them to stick around? Would that be a customer experience that you would be psyched about? Mystery shop yourself, right? Like, go through your own onboarding process and see if it feels good for you. Or even better, grab a friend that doesn't know anything about your company and have them go through it, so that they're not because the CEO knows so much.
Right.
That's what I would do. Those are 4 action steps I would take.
Well, what's interesting for me is human psychology says, okay, well, how do we feel as the customer? Right. And so the CEO, the business owner, the founder that's listening right now, think about that for a minute, and think about an experience that you recently had. And it's unfortunate in our society, but I am going to say this strongly. It's a pretty bold statement, but I think customer experience is pretty poor across the board. Heck really. Yeah. And I think people are shocked when follow-up happens. I think people are shocked when they feel appreciated. I think people are shocked, right? So, and I think that's very common. I think it's more common than not. So I think a CEO or owner that's listening to this could literally think of, what was the last time you had a really good experience?
Right.
And you were really like, wow, that really made me feel like valued. Boom, right there. Take that emotion that you felt as a customer and turn it right into your company and say, how can we do this in our company?
Right.
And that again is that psychology, that mindset, which I'm so huge on, the mindset. And so dive into how you feel and dive in how you feel when it didn't go well as a customer, right? Like, be like, God, that was shit. Like, that was total shit. Like, I mean, they didn't return my call. It took 2 weeks, this, that. They said they promised this and it didn't happen. Well, is that happening in your company? Boy, rip the Band-Aid off and be like, could this be happening in your company, right?
So, and I'll give it a caveat, right? Like, I agree with everything you've said. And when you think about those great experiences, did they happen because the company was great at delivering the customer experience, or did they happen because you had one good employee?
Oh yeah,
that just
yeah.
Because that's when a lot of people do that exercise, and I'll do workshops and we'll go through that exercise, because one of the cool things about working in customer experience is that everybody is a customer. Everybody knows what it is to be a customer. And so we'll talk about it. And oftentimes the examples that will be brought up are, I went to a restaurant and the server brought us a free dessert because it was our anniversary or something like that. And that was a really great customer experience. So cool. Now, was that company policy? Did they have a process for that? And by the way, like B2B and B2C are very different, but
For sure.
we'll just take this example.
Yeah.
Did the company have a process for that? Or did you just have a server who took initiative? And those are very different too. So it's not just about, I had a really great experience because somebody was good at their job or was going the extra mile. Did you have a good experience because the company said, this is something we want our employees to do consistently for our customers?
That's interesting, because I've got an example of calling a certain company. These are big companies, right? Things that we deal with every day, whether it's utilities or whatever. And you get one person, super nice, super friendly, follow up with an email, all this stuff. That same company, like a month later, make the call, the person's not nice. Now, they could have had a bad day. I get all of that, right? But completely different experience. Well, that tells you right there, it's probably not company-wide. And that also tells you that the personality of people can have a big impact on customer experience, right? The personalities. So you probably should be very choosy on who is in those positions, right? Because they do hold the key to a lot of revenue for your company.
For sure. And when you have the consistent process, even if you are having a really bad day, at least you know what beats to hit. You may not be on your best. You may not be like firing on all cylinders, but at least you know what to do, as opposed to having to figure it out every time, which just makes it harder when you are having a bad day.
That's a good point. I want to tell a quick story that is exactly related to this. So I was consulting with a dental office years and years ago, and they had the woman that was the front desk person, right? She was answering the phone. She was the front desk person. Okay. So she'd been in the position. People need to hear these numbers, because we did the numbers. 17 years she'd been picking up the phone. 17, right? Okay. So we were recording their calls, right? For data, right? And how many times would she answer the phone and actually get people to book the appointment to go in the dentist and all of that, right? And across the board, people were getting angry. People were hanging up on her, and her close rate to appointment, just to the appointment, by the way, this isn't selling, and it's really just to get to the appointment. And it's dentistry, right? Your mouth. She was probably 30% effective, maybe. So what I did with the dentist was I said, what's the lifetime value of a patient? Whatever it was, $2,000, $8,000, whatever it was, right? Thousands of dollars. This is a little $1.5 million dental practice. But anyways, so I said, okay, great. So you're getting X number of calls a month. So where we're going here. You're getting X number of calls a month. 70% are going away. You've lost them. So of that 70%, here's the value. And we did the math. And now this is a small dental office, right? So I know a lot of people are thinking $20 million businesses, whatever. He had lost almost $2 million in revenue from keeping that same person answering that telephone.
Yeah.
And when I told him that on a phone call, this before Zoom, he went totally quiet, and I said, let me ask you a question. Are you going to keep her answering the phone, or are you going to make a change? right? And that's typical me to kind of get in there, get in your face a little bit. And he said, no, I don't know if he fired her because I don't like that. I don't want to, and I've been with her, but maybe she's not right for that position. Don't have her there, get her in the back office somewhere, right? But there's a perfect example of, they call it in dentistry, patient experience, right? And she was failing miserably, and it cost them several $1 million.
Yeah. We've seen so many companies
Crazy.
where you have an employee like that, and it is easy to then say they screwed up, they stink, they weren't good at their job. But I would also ask the question, were they given the tools and procedures to be good? Ooh. And, you're holding her accountable, but did they upskill her? Did they invest in her? Or did they just say like, oh, that's just a receptionist? Because the other thing about dentistry, which is really interesting, is so you're supposed to go for a dental appointment every 6 months, right? They want you to come every 6 months.
Yep.
It is so easy to let that 6 months become 9.
Oh boy.
Right? Let's just say that 6 to 9. And we do that all the time, right? You make an appointment for 6 months and then you get a meeting set at that time. So you push it out and then all of a sudden it's 9 months. Well, at the end of 2 years, just 2 years, you're now seeing that patient 3 times instead of 4. So you're losing 25% of that revenue that you should be. Right.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And so having like, even in dental offices where you think these are very simple processes, and frankly, retention should be pretty easy because
it's your teeth.
Right. And nobody really feels like going and shopping a new dentist. Like, did you do basically the job for me?
Right,
Great.
right.
I'll sign up for the next 6 months. Like, I find it hard to break up with a dentist because they make it easy to stay.
Right.
But if you're not getting those reminders, if you're not like, it's just these little things that that make a big difference for the revenue and profitability of a dental office.
You made such a good point that I'm going to backtrack like 5 minutes where you said, was she trained? Was she upskilled? Did she? Because now that's on the owner, and that would be the dentist, right? That's like, well, now, and I didn't ask that question, but I do know one thing, and they should have not let her do this. She would forward the calls to her cell phone, and one call, she was in a grocery store, ching, 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 blah, blah, all this stuff was going on, and she took the call. And when she took and you could hear it, people be in the background. She didn't apologize one time, right? And that really is common sense. Number one, do not take calls like that, right? Like, I mean, I guess maybe she felt more productive, and so she was committing her time. That's awesome. But no. That should have been halted immediately. Like, part of the process, don't do that. Don't do that.
It's so easy to see how it happens, right? The dentist is focused on providing dentistry, and maybe there's an office manager and they've got a lot of work to do, and it just isn't prioritized. So now we're straight back to the initial conversation, or the conversation we were having earlier is why don't companies do this? This is a perfect example of why, and a perfect example of the impact on a company.
Yeah, this has been so cool. I'm so happy to have you on. This was great. So if people want to get a hold of you, websites, whatever you want to give out now, because I definitely want everybody to go get your book for sure. Absolutely go get your book. We'll have it all in the show notes as well too. So it'll be on my website and all of that stuff. But what's the website?
Sure. So there's 2 websites. The first one is our consulting side. So that's Alignment, MINT, forgrowth.com. So alignmentforgrowth.com.
Okay.
And then we have our online training for customer experience and all the things that I've been talking about today with how do you create these processes and these plays.
Awesome.
And it's called CXology, and it's cxology.co. And then the calculator is churnvirus.com.
Love it.
The book is keepyourcustomersbook.com. And you can find all of this on LinkedIn, and come find me on LinkedIn. I'm on as Ali Cudby, and would love to connect with any of your listeners.
And C-U-D-B-Y, right? Last name?
C-U-D-B-Y, A-L-I, and then C-U-D-B-Y. Not any of this A-L-L-E-Y. I'm not.
Don't even get me going on spellings of My last name is Peterson, and everybody spells it Peterson. It's Pedersen, and Americans pronounce it Pedersen. So I've dealt with this my whole life, my whole
feel
entire
your
life.
pain. I feel your pain.
But keep your customers. That's the book. So, worst case scenario of all the listeners, just go get the dang book. I mean, come on. And then from there, they can find out more about you. But thank you so much for your time. I do appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed the conversation.
You've just listened to the Dominate Your Market podcast with CEO, business consultant, and author Michael Peterson. Growth-minded CEOs hire Michael to explode their revenues, build an amazing company, and create a transformational mindset that encapsulates growth, success, and ultimately happiness. His book, Dominate Your Market, is creating quite a stir in the marketplace. Go to dominateyourmarketbook.com and get your first chapter free.